Eastern Fairfax County.
Thank you, Madam President. Speaking to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. And ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate the work that's gone into this, and certainly it's been a long time coming to get to this point. And I'll talk about that really quick at the end. But, you know, I felt the 13 years I've been here in either chamber, it seems to me like we never have had any money to spend. And if anything, we've been in a cutting mode. And I felt like the senator from Bath, that this budget presented a real historic opportunity for us to make a dent in what I view as a multi-decade problems. And while I'm going to vote for the budget, I feel like we really missed some opportunities. Just to give you an example, when I attended James Madison University, 1989, 1993, the state used to fund the state paid for 2/3 of my education. Today, the state only pays for 1/3. Chev has told me to plug that gap, it would cost about $900 million, basically what we send doing car tax relief every year, or about $100 million less than what we're refunding to taxpayers in this budget. In fact, this budget with the tax cuts, not tax relief, the tax cuts that are in this budget, you could fund that entire difference, that entire 1/3 that we don't pay towards our in-state college tuition 4.5 times. I mean, these are the kinds of priorities, historic inequities, historic problems, historic failures to fund things that I think we're passing up. Before this session, our teacher salaries ranked 49th in America relative to the wealth in this country. And yeah, we've made a little bit of a dent in that by doing a 10% teacher pay increase. But remember, we are in an 8% inflationary environment, which means if we don't have a recession next year and we don't have to cut in the next budget, that maybe our teachers will get a 2% pay increase at the end of the day. So we're not really making up a lot of ground on these other states that have more money than we do and invest more in their education professionals than we do. We also haven't made any real progress on pre-K. There's a little bit of new pre-K money in this, but Virginia doesn't have a real pre-K program. And all the studies show that if you want to improve the education of your children, that's the best place to invest. We're way behind on that. We have over a $200 million state park maintenance backlog. Michigan funded their entire state park maintenance backlog with their ARPA funds. But instead, you know, we've chosen to use other things for it. But the state parks folks have lots of problems. And I would also point out, I've done 2 police ride-alongs now in the last month. Every officer I talk to talks about how they're hemorrhaging officers. The ones I talk to all talk about their next job, and they're not planning on making it a career. It's because we don't pay our law enforcement enough, right? And we're giving them a raise. They're getting good raises here, but it's not competitive with inflation. It's not competitive with the private sector salaries. I'm also kind of disappointed with the fact that none of these tax cuts have sunsets on them, because I feel like people have a false sense of comfort right now that what's going on in our economy right now is somehow sustainable. The reality is, the reason our economy is raging right now is because the federal government borrowed $5 trillion or printed $5 trillion and injected it into our economy to create all this activity. And the idea that we're going to be flush forever is crazy, because as we've heard at our Senate finance briefings before, the more sugar you pump into the economy, the harder the crash is. And without those sunsets, we are baking in, from my perspective, unsustainable revenue objectives for when the bad times come. And I don't think that rainy day fund's going to be enough to make up for it. And without sunsets on those tax cuts, we're going to be making even harder choices when the time comes when the economy crashes. And I do want to congratulate the conferees for finally reaching this agreement. I mean, I know it was hard. Every time there's a bad crash, it's hard to figure things out. And I'm sure when there's a lot of money to go around, it's hard to figure things out. And I can appreciate the extra time. But the last thing I just want to say, Madam President, is that I think it's also important that the third floor recognizes that this is a bipartisan budget. This is a budget that has Democratic input and it has Republican input. It already has Republican input. And Virginia needs a budget June 30. We don't have time to have a lengthy, extended discussion or a lot of conflict. I'm very hopeful that the governor just leaves it as is and congratulates us on all the hard work that the conferees have done, instead of using that little power we call the line item veto or his amendment pen. We don't need that. There's been a lot of work put to this, and I hope he just leaves it alone, because we all need to move on. Our local governments need certainty, and people need to know what their salary and their paychecks are going to be on July 1. Thank you, Madam President.